Nearly a half-century at the very top of American politics. Along the way, he became known for some of the worst decisions.
Apologize for what?
And most notorious gaffes ever made in Washington.
A man I'm proud to call my friend, a man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America.
And it happens to be, as Barack says, a three-letter word, jobs. J-O-B-S, jobs.
His mom lived in Long Island for 10 years or so. God rest her soul. And although wait, your mom's still alive as your dad passed. God bless her soul.
But behind the blunder lies a troubling track record. Even leading Obama officials have said he is wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades.
Mr. President, my suggestion is don't go.
His legislative legacy, called a disaster.
And I'd say lock the SOBs up. We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
A habit of injecting race into politics, often with groan-worthy results.
The largest growth in population is Indian Americans. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids.
But what about the speeches and policy decisions he has made along the way? Who is the man behind the politician? This is the story of the Joe you need to know. After all, he wants to be your next president. In 2019, just before Joe Biden announced his run for the presidency, Vanity Fair wrote, Joe Biden still has to answer for decades of bad choices. Ahead, we will examine some of those choices and the man who is asking for the biggest job in the world, the presidency of the United States. But first, let's get up to date on who is sometimes called Lunch Bucket Joe, a humble public servant who portrayed himself as a blue-collar everyman.
All my time in public life, once I've gotten involved, I've been referred to as middle-class Joe. Not always meant as a compliment.
Joe Biden has built a lifetime career in politics with practically no experience outside of government his entire life.
Let me say this simply and clearly, and I mean this. The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers.
But so-called middle-class Joe Biden raked in $11 million the first year after leaving Obama's White House. The following year brought a windfall of another $4.6 million. In fact, middle-class Joe lives in a 12,000 square foot mansion outside Washington, D.C. 10 bedrooms, home theater, and parking for 20 cars. He leases their $6 million home, paying $20,000 a month to a wealthy financier who lives next door. The Bidens also recently purchased a luxury waterfront home in Delaware with 6 bedrooms and 5.5 bathrooms, 3 fireplaces, and a gourmet kitchen. List price? $3 million. Not bad for public service. It began almost a half-century ago when Joe Biden was elected to the U.S. Senate at the age of 29. The year was 1972 as the country was emerging from the civil rights movement. Biden wasted no time comparing his political aspirations with the struggles of blacks and women.
I'm a 29-year-old oddball. The only reason I was able to raise the money is I was able to have a national constituency to run for office. I'm like the token black or the token woman.
But Biden quickly rose through the ranks of his party, running for president twice before landing the job of vice president in the Obama administration.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
It was perhaps the biggest achievement during 8 years of the Obama administration, the killing of Osama bin Laden in a secret raid in Pakistan. And if it were up to Joe Biden, it never would have taken place.
And we had to make a decision. The president, he went around the table with all the senior people, including the the chiefs of staff. Every single person in that room hedged their bet, except Leon Panetta. Leon said, go. Everyone else said 49, 51, this. So it got to me and he said, Joe, what do you think? And I said, I didn't know we had so many economists around the table. I said, we owe the man a direct answer. Mr. President, my suggestion is don't go. We have to do 2 more things to see if he's there. He walked out and said, I'll give you my decision.
It is unclear what 2 things Biden thought needed to be done, but Obama confirmed Biden's advice during the 3rd presidential debate in 2012, responding to criticism from candidate Mitt Romney.
Of leadership, and those decisions are not always popular. Those decisions generally are not poll tested, and even some in my own party, including my current vice president, had the same critique as you did.
When SEAL Team 6 seized records from the 9/11 mastermind's compound, U.S. intelligence officials discovered the terrorist had plans to assassinate then President Barack Obama. Bin Laden's rationale was revealing. Killing Obama automatically will make Vice President Biden take over the presidency. Biden is totally unprepared for that post, which will lead the U.S. into a crisis. It may come as no surprise bin Laden would be critical of Biden, but it did surprise many in the Obama administration when Robert Gates, Obama's own defense secretary, called Biden a foreign policy disaster.
How's this for candid? On Biden, Gates writes, I think he has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades.
Would he be an effective commander-in-chief?
I don't know. I don't know.
On the subject of foreign policy, Biden received criticism from both sides on his waffling positions concerning Iraq. He voted against the Gulf War, which successfully liberated Kuwait in 1991. However, in 2002, Biden was for the Iraq War before he was against it. Here he speaks out in support of an Iraq invasion.
Some of my own party have said that it was a mistake to go to Iraq in the first place, and believe that it's not worth the cost, whatever benefit may flow from our engagement in Iraq. But the cost of not acting against Saddam, I think, would have been much greater. And so is the cost, and so will be the cost, of not finishing this job.
But Biden soon flipped his support. As President George W. Bush's generals and troops on the ground recommended a troop surge strategy in Iraq, Biden suddenly opposed the move.
And again, this is not to embarrass him. This is not designed to say, Mr. President, you're wrong. This is designed to say, Mr. President, please don't go do this.
Biden instead proposed dividing the country into ethnic and sectarian enclaves. One Iraq expert told Reuters it would be extremely unwise of the Democratic Party to make Biden's ideas the centerpiece of their Iraq strategy. Meanwhile, the troop surge Biden opposed was a resounding success. In fact, during the Obama administration, Biden was forced to admit that very fact when the administration claimed credit for a significant troop reduction in the region.
You and President Obama are claiming credit for this milestone. The real credit goes to President Bush's surge of troops, which helped bring some kind of security here, and that you're just unwilling to acknowledge that. Does he have a point?
That is simply not true. The president's speech acknowledged President Bush's contribution.
But not the surge.
Look, if you really go back and take a look at this, you could argue the surge made possible what was the most significant thing that occurred.
But Biden's wrong side of history approach to foreign policy carries much further than Iraq. On NPR's The Two-Way radio program, former Secretary Gates launched a detailed and blistering attack on Biden's foreign policy choices.
The vice president, when he was a senator, a very new senator, voted against the aid package for South Vietnam that was part of the deal when we pulled out of South Vietnam to try and help them survive. He said that when the Shah fell in Iran in 1979, that was a step forward for our progress toward human rights in Iran. He opposed virtually every element of President Reagan's defense buildup. He voted against the B-1, the B-2, the MX. He voted against the first Gulf War. So on a number of these major issues, I frankly, over a long period of time, I think he'd been wrong.
It was a scathing criticism by a man who, like Biden, had served 5 decades in public service under 8 presidents, both Democrat and Republican.
Get rid of the Trump tax cut.
And it doesn't stop at foreign policy. On the domestic front, at a time when many Americans are suffering income loss and small businesses are struggling due to the coronavirus pandemic, Biden's agenda appears to include government spending on an unprecedented scale, raising taxes to pay for it.
How many of you did really well with that $1.9 trillion tax cut that increased? Really good shape, right? Really changed your, well, you did. Well, that's good. I'm glad to see you're doing well already. And I'm good. But guess what? If you elect me, you're not going to have your taxes are going to be raised, not cut.
Just ahead, Biden lands in hot water for his decisions concerning criminal justice and comes out for amnesty after he voted against it. Just over a decade ago, Joe Biden was a fierce defender of the U.S. border, a critic of Mexico, and against amnesty for undocumented workers. Here he is in 2006.
Can you scare an employer in this country, whether he's an agricultural worker or a housewife, into not hiring an illegal because the punishment's so high that if you get caught,
yes,
it's a huge embarrassment to your family, and you may just get hit with a fine that'll kill you.
Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. And that's what we should do. Well, I think we should do that.
Because you can't catch everybody.
You can't. No, you can't. And the last
But Joe Biden has severely shifted positions. In 2020, there is little room on the left for the type of views he held less than 15 years ago. Biden detailed his newfound support of amnesty and his new agenda in this virtual campaign event,
including providing a clear roadmap to citizenship for 11 million undocumented undocumented immigrants. Stop treating them the way they're being treated, who are living in and enriching our communities every single day. I know that's a pretty big agenda, but this is the moment to get it done.
Today, Biden now calls the same undocumented workers he once condemned essential.
The pandemic has lifted blinders off so many people in this country about who's really essential to our economic strength.
So too, as early as 2006, Biden was bullish on building a border wall. He sounded a lot like President Trump at this 2006 event in South Carolina.
Folks, I voted for a fence. I voted unlike most Democrats. Some of you won't like it. I voted for 700-mile fence.
But the Biden of today is far different. He says he favors electronic monitoring methods to enforce the border, and his border wall position has changed dramatically.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration, number one.
As the Trump administration administered land confiscations in order to move forward with border security construction, Biden told NPR he would end all of it and provide citizenship to 11 million illegal immigrants.
What about the land confiscations?
End, stop, done, over, not going to do it. Withdraw the lawsuits. We're out. We're not going to confiscate the land. On day one, I'm going to send a legislative immigration reform bill to Congress to provide a roadmap to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants.
Just as Biden has quickly pivoted left on immigration issues, his past decisions and actions surrounding race have also come under scrutiny. In March of 2020, one far-left publication said Joe Biden has built a career on betraying black voters, noting throughout his career he secures the loyalty of African Americans while working nonstop to let them down. Biden drew criticism after a speech to a largely African American audience when he compared 2012 candidate Mitt Romney to a slave owner.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
In 2020, Biden again demonstrated a troubling assumption that all African Americans would support him in lockstep.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Biden was forced to apologize. Later, the show's host appeared on MSNBC.
Do you think there's a risk that not just Joe Biden, but the Democratic Party in general just takes for granted that, well, the black people are with us. We don't need to offer anything more. Do you worry that that is the attitude that Democrats are taking toward the black community?
I mean, I know that's the attitude.
At the start of Biden's career in Washington, Democrat Mississippi Senator James Eastland, who once called to abolish the Negro race, served as a mentor to young Senator Biden. Eastland and other Democrat segregationists offered to help Biden's re-elections throughout his career.
Are you going to apologize?
Apologize for what?
Biden's racial past has crept into his past campaigns for president, such as this moment from a 2007 Democratic presidential debate.
Senator Biden, you and your campaign have had a number of occasions to correct or clarify things you've said relating to race, including your remarks about Senator Obama being, quote, clean and articulate, your comment about Indians working at 7-Eleven. Do these gaffes or misunderstandings, or however you would characterize them, indicate you're uncomfortable talking about race?
I may have phrased those things wrongly, but when I talked about the Indian population, what I was making the point was they're building families. They're coming by businesses, 7-Elevens and Dunkin' Donuts and small shops, just like those Italian immigrants used to do. But no one who knows me in my state, no one who I've worked with in the United States Congress has ever wondered about my commitment to civil rights.
Later, during the 2019 Democratic presidential debates, Senator Kamala Harris, now Biden's vice presidential running mate, called out his decision to deliver a glowing eulogy to Democratic Senator and former Ku Klux Klan member Robert Byrd.
Robert C. Byrd elevated the Senate.
Senator Byrd was an exalted cyclops, or high official in the Ku Klux Klan. He joined with Biden to oppose busing, a policy that sought to integrate public schools.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
It was the 1970s, and Biden joined with Senator Jesse Helms to oppose racial integration. During a hearing, Biden lamented, "My children are going to grow up in a jungle, the jungle being a racial jungle." Senator Helms even welcomed Joe Biden to the ranks of the enlightened.
I've asked him and have yet to hear him agree that busing that was court-ordered and mandated in most places, and in that era in which I was bused, was necessary. And he has yet to agree that his position on this, which was to work with segregationists and oppose busing, was wrong, period.
Senator Cory Booker added to Kamala Harris's concerns when he took on Biden's controversial decisions on crime and racial justice. He wasted no time challenging Biden's credibility on racial matters.
Mr. Vice President has said that since the 1970s, every major crime bill, major and minor, has had his name on it. And sir, those are your words, not mine. And this is one of those instances where the House was set on fire and you claimed responsibility for those laws. And you can't just now come out with a plan to put out that fire.
Biden's recent calls to redirect funding away from local police departments and decriminalize drugs is a far cry from this Joe Biden, criticizing then-President George H.W. Bush's anti-drug plan.
In a nutshell, the president's plan doesn't include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, not enough prosecutors to convict them, not enough judges to sentence them, and not enough prison cells to put them away for a long time.
Biden joined with Senator Strom Thurmond to begin mass incarceration and even death for drug offenders.
Under the leadership of Senator Thurmond, and I'd like to suggest that I take some small credit for it myself as well, and others, the presiding officer, that there is now a death penalty.
Biden and Thurmond were on a tear.
The death penalty. It provides 53 death penalty offenses.
Biden was on a mission to radically change crime laws. Harper's Magazine called it the age of mass incarceration for Black Americans.
We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
Drug criminals who weren't sentenced to death lost everything, and were locked away.
We changed the law so that if you are arrested and you are a drug dealer, under our forfeiture statute, you can, the government can, take everything you own. Everything from your car to your house, your bank account, not merely what they confiscate in terms of the dollars from the transaction that you just got caught engaging in. They can take everything. We have laws in the last several years where we don't allow judges discretion to sentence people. Flat time sentencing. You get caught, you go to jail.
Biden took to the Senate floor to push for more mass incarceration and over 100,000 new police officers. He was not shy in revealing his true feelings.
Every time Richard Nixon, when I was running in 1972, would say law and order, the Democratic mantra, the response was law and order with justice, whatever that meant. And I'd say lock the SOBs up.
The crime bill was signed by President Clinton in 1994. As Biden and Clinton celebrated, the bill devastated communities of color across the country. In 2019, New York Magazine called Joe Biden's record on integration and mass incarceration worse than any other Democratic candidates. Today, perhaps in an attempt to appease the social justice progressive wing of his party, Biden sings a different tune, casting the police as part of the problem.
The last thing you need is an up-armored Humvee coming into a neighborhood. It's like the military invading. They don't know anybody. They become the enemy.
As he told this progressive activist, he supports redirecting money from the police.
My generic point is
But do we agree that we can redirect some of the funding?
Yes, absolutely.
But Biden quickly clarified his remarks, as many view redirecting funding to mean defunding police.
Do you support defunding the police?
No, I don't support defunding the police. I support conditioning federal aid to police based on whether or not they meet certain basic standards of decency and honorableness, and in fact are able to demonstrate they can protect the community.
The Washington Post wrote the Biden campaign marks a significant move to the left from where Biden and his party were only recently, on everything from climate and guns to health care and policing. When we return, Joe Biden's close relationship with China and a father-son roadshow nets serious cash. The year was 2013, and President Obama had just won a second term. Vice President Joe Biden was headed to China. The official reason was to push for the administration's so-called rebalance of power in Asia. But the Bidens had something else planned. Joe's son, Hunter Biden, was forming a Chinese private equity fund that was planning to raise billions.
This video shows Chinese diplomats greeting Vice President Biden as he arrived in Beijing in December of 2013. Right by his side, his son Hunter. Less than 2 weeks later, Hunter's firm had new business, creating an investment fund in China involving the government-controlled Bank of China. With reports, they hope to raise $1.5 billion.
As Joe and Hunter Biden deplaned Air Force Two on the runway in Beijing, there were two cars waiting. One to escort Joe Biden to meet with government leaders, another whisking Hunter Biden to the Bank of China.
Unknown to the press back then, Hunter Biden was forming a Chinese private equity fund, planning to raise money, including from Chinese investors. 10 days after the Biden's trip, Shanghai authorities issued the fund's business license.
If I only got to hear you sing, it would have been worth the trip.
In a mere 10 days after the official trip, Shanghai authorities had issued the license. Coincidentally, Hunter Biden's new investment fund received a $1.5 billion investment from China. Hunter was on the board of directors of the group.
The way I was raised was to believe that change presents opportunity.
Mr. Vice President, what's your take on that? Was there a conflict of interest there? Was there a clear conflict of interest?
Joe Biden, while he was vice president, took billions of dollars in bribes
from the Chinese government in the form of payments to his son Hunter's businesses. In exchange, Biden was soft on Chinese military and economic aggression.
In 2019, Hunter Biden was peppered with questions about his billion-dollar fund by ABC News.
What do you say to people who believe this is exactly why people hate Washington? A vice president's son can make money in countries where your father is doing official government business.
Well, I don't know what to tell you.
The investment raised questions about Joe Biden's consistent support of China in U.S. policy circles.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the east, in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. They're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
It also may help explain Joe Biden's strong opposition to President Trump's early intervention banning travel from China in the early throes of the global coronavirus pandemic.
On January 31st, I imposed travel restrictions on foreign nations and anybody that had been to China or people coming out of China.
Biden called the move xenophobic.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia. But neither should we panic or fall back on xenophobia. Labeling COVID-19 a foreign virus does not displace accountability for the misjudgments that have been taken thus far by the Trump administration.
Joe Biden didn't just side with China on the virus. He did. He called me, again, xenophobic. That's what he said. You all heard it many times. He described the rise of China as, quote, a very positive development. Not a positive development. Not for us, it's not.
Even Trump's critics admit the travel ban was crucial to slowing the spread of the virus within the U.S.
We don't need any new sanction laws.
Biden consistently opposed sanctions on China, even when the country was blatantly taking advantage of the United States, including stealing intellectual property.
The Senate's passage last week of legislation granting China permanent normal trade relations, even though the chairman and I disagreed on that issue, I think has to be viewed as a significant accomplishment.
He fought for China's membership into the World Trade Organization, along with most favored nation trade status. 20 years later, everything Biden supported proved dead wrong. Nearly 4 million American jobs lost and American manufacturing decimated.
It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper.
As recently as 2011, in the wake of staggering job loss to China, Biden reiterated his support for a strong China in an op-ed he wrote for the New York Times. Biden wrote, "I remain convinced that a successful China can make our country more prosperous, not less." That same year, this was the headline.
Standard & Poor's stripped the US of its AAA credit rating earlier this month, prompting the Chinese state news agency Xinhua to write, "The days when the debt-ridden Uncle Sam could leisurely squander unlimited overseas borrowing appear to be numbered."
With Biden's help, China enjoyed tremendous prosperity at the expense of American businesses and workers. This relationship led to Biden receiving a tremendous amount of money from China.
The Penn Biden Center's Penn's home in Washington, D.C. It is incredibly important that we be there to be at the center of shaping the national policy debate about our place in the world.
In fact, it turns out the Biden Center at the University of Pennsylvania is largely dependent on China for its operations. The Biden Center failed to report tens of millions of dollars in donations. Since 2017, the Biden Center accepted $22 million in anonymous funding from China. Federal law requires any foreign gift over $250,000 must be disclosed. Members of Congress cited extreme concern about potential foreign influence, as the university saw a tidal wave of over $70 million in Chinese cash flow through the doors since the Biden Center was established. When we return, Joe and Hunter Biden's overseas roadshow heads to Ukraine, for another big payday. Throughout his 8 years as Obama's vice president, Joe Biden paid frequent visits to Ukraine as the face of the administration's foreign policy to the Eastern European country.
Hey folks, Joe Biden. I just got off a 8-9 hour flight from Washington to the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv.
His presence became so frequent, he joked to the then Ukraine head of state.
This is my third trip in the last 7 months. You must be getting tired of seeing me as often as you do.
But Biden wasn't alone. He brought along his son, Hunter Biden.
The Biden family is ready, and we will do this as we always have, as a family.
It was May 2019, the day of Joe Biden's 2020 presidential campaign announcement. And despite the family-friendly theme, there was a key member of the family noticeably absent, Hunter Biden.
Mr. Vice President, got a quick question for you. It's a question we tried to ask repeatedly. Can we ask you about Ukraine and China? But kept getting blocked. Questions about foreign deals his son Hunter Biden pursued.
My father, Joe Biden.
In countries where Joe Biden was working as America's top diplomat.
Hunter's business dealings in Ukraine were starting to attract unwanted attention on the campaign trail.
At issue was Hunter Biden profiting off his dad's work as vice president, and did Joe Biden allow it?
A controversial Ukrainian natural gas company called Burisma appointed Hunter Biden to their board of directors, paying him $50,000 a month, despite Hunter having no known experience in Ukraine or with natural gas.
And if your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not.
The timeline of the lucrative appointment is revealing. In early 2014, one of Hunter Biden's close friends, Devon Archer, joined the gas company. Then on April 16, 2014, Archer visited the White House where he had a very long meeting with Vice President Biden. Just 2 days later, Hunter Biden quietly joined the board of the gas company, which was already under investigation for fraud. And just 3 days after that, Vice President Biden promised over $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer aid to Ukraine's gas industry.
I want to know what you would most like to see my country doing.
Did you and your father ever discuss Ukraine?
No. As I said, the only time was after a news account. It wasn't a discussion in any way. There's no but to this. No, we never did.
What's your understanding of what your son was doing for an extraordinary amount of money?
I don't know what he was doing. I know he was on the board. I found out he was on the board after he was on the board, and that was it. And there's nobody...
Well, you've had a lot of time. Isn't this something you want to get to the bottom of?
No, because I trust my son.
But that doesn't pass the smell test.
The stories weren't adding up. The Washington Post wrote, "The appointment of the vice president's son looks nepotistic at best, nefarious at worst." In Washington, lobbyists for Hunter's Ukrainian gas company swung into action. Newly discovered documents reveal they wasted no time invoking Hunter Biden's name to curry favor with officials at Obama's Justice and State Departments, pressuring them to quash the investigation. In 2020, Republican senators wanted to investigate the documents more closely. Democrats went ballistic.
The Democrats are objecting, and I think maybe they're protesting too much. It actually raises my suspicion level of what is to be found out in these documents.
The documents revealed an urgent meeting which took place in February 2016, during the election year. On the agenda, quashing the corruption investigations into Burisma, the Ukrainian oil company that Hunter Biden served on the board. Allegations involved fraud, money laundering, and a variety of other crimes. 1 month later, Vice President Biden made his move.
And I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee.
At a 2018 appearance, Biden revealed details of his 2016 exchange with Ukrainian officials, a demand using $1 billion in U.S. aid money as leverage.
And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to the press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion.
In a sworn affidavit dated September 4th, the prosecutor Biden refers to said, on several occasions, the president asked me to consider the possibility of winding down the investigative actions in respect of this company, but I refused to close this investigation.
I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired.
In total, it is estimated Joe Biden's son collected $3 million from Ukraine's Burisma. Neither officials at Burisma nor Hunter Biden can identify any specific contribution he made to the company. Early in the 2020 Democratic debates, Biden defended his actions and those of his son.
My son did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. I carried out the policy of the United States government in rooting out corruption in Ukraine. You know there's not one single bit of evidence, not one little tiny bit, to suggest anything done was wrong.
When we return, Joe Biden then and now on abortion, women, and is he mentally up to the job?
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. Senator Biden is here today to discuss his memoir, Promises to Keep.
In his 2007 book, Promises to Keep, Joe Biden wrote, I've stuck to my middle-of-the-road position on abortion for more than 30 years. I still vote against partial birth abortion and federal funding. And I'd like to make it easier for scared young mothers to choose not to have an abortion. But I will also vote against a constitutional amendment that strips a woman of her right to make her own choice.
For many years as U.S. Senator, I have supported the Hyde Amendment like many others have.
For decades, Biden supported the Hyde Amendment, which forbids government insurance programs from covering abortion. Biden often cited his Catholic faith as his opposition to taxpayer-funded abortion. However, as he ran for president in 2020, he shifted course.
If I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code.
I think that this is an example of him being pushed from the left in his party. There are progressives and women's rights activists in this country that are saying there's no middle ground for them on this issue.
The Washington Post wrote, Joe Biden's flip-flop reeked of insincerity. At this rate, he'll be a socialist by Labor Day. Biden's dramatic shift to the left is evident in policy positions on everything from education to tax hikes to climate change. It has led some to speculate who is really in charge of the campaign's message. On climate change, for example, it appeared Biden simply plagiarized policy goals from a variety of progressive websites.
Joe Biden's campaign fending off allegations of plagiarism today after revelations that the former vice president's brand new climate change policy plan copied language directly from multiple liberal activist groups and a news site.
While some are questioning who's minding the store at the Biden campaign, others have noticed troubling mental slips with Biden which occur regularly.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy. Give me a look, though, okay?
His public appearances are infrequent and shockingly limited for a candidate running for president.
Have you been tested for some degree of cognitive decline?
I've been tested and I'm constantly tested.
Signs of forgetfulness plague the few appearances he does make, especially when he is off teleprompter.
You know, the rapidly rising I don't know, if you could take care, if you were a quartermaster, you can sure in hell take care of running a, department store thing, where in the second floor of the ladies department or whatever, you know what I mean?
Episodes like these have prompted new questions about his ability to make tough decisions in a potential Biden administration.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Seemingly confused at the details of his own health care plan at the third Democratic debate, Biden's opponents saw blood in the water.
They do not have to buy in.
You just said that 2 minutes ago. You just said 2 minutes ago that they would have to buy in. You said they would have to buy in.
Have to buy in. If she qualifies for Medicaid,
are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Be in for it.
Are you forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago? I mean, I can't believe that you said 2 minutes ago that they had to buy in, and now you're saying they don't have to buy. You're forgetting that.
I said anyone.
I mean, look.
Regardless of his past or his present condition, Biden heads into November 2020 asking Americans to send him to the White House. We have examined a number of Joe Biden's bad decisions. Now, it's up to America to decide.
Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Oh. Thanks. 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 Okay.
Joe.